Okay, welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
All right, so today we are diving into a topic that has the potential to really shake things up when it comes to how we understand American citizenship, right?
Absolutely.
The Trump administration, as you know, they're taking the issue of birthright citizenship to the Supreme Court, basically saying, hey, we think this long-held interpretation of the 14th Amendment needs a second look.
Yeah, a pretty big deal.
And our goal today, for you listening, is to get down to the brass tacks of this legal challenge.
Exactly.
We want to break down the arguments, go back into the legal history, and paint a clear picture of why this move by the Trump administration is so significant. And we're basing this deep dive primarily on a CNN Politics article that came out on March 13th, 2025.
Right.
But this is not just some dry academic debate happening in a vacuum, right?
Definitely not.
This goes straight to the heart of what it means to be a citizen in America.
Yeah.
And it forces us to ask tough questions about who belongs and who doesn't. It's like legal history is colliding head-on with some of the most heated debates we have about immigration today. So let's untangle this a bit. What is it exactly that the Trump administration is asking the Supreme Court to do?
So the CNN article lays out how the Trump administration has filed what they're calling emergency appeals with the Supreme Court.
Right.
And at the heart of these appeals, they're basically asking the court to clear the way for them to move forward with plans.
Okay.
Plans that could drastically change how we understand birthright citizenship.
So this isn't just about tightening border controls or tweaking immigration processes.
Right.
This is about upending the whole idea of who automatically becomes a citizen at birth in the United States, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fundamental shift in thinking.
Curious.
The article really emphasizes that this goes against a legal interpretation that has been widely accepted and upheld for well over a century.
Yeah, over 100 years. And most people, I think, when they think about that widely accepted interpretation, they immediately think about the 14th Amendment. Right.
Could you walk us through what most people understand that Amendment's citizenship clause to mean?
Sure. So the traditional way of understanding the 14th Amendment citizenship clause is basically this. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. It's the part about anyone born on U.S. soil being considered a citizen.
Right.
And the Supreme Court made this view even more solid in a case back in 1898 called United States v. Wong Kim Ark.
Okay.
This case specifically looked at the citizenship status of children born in the U.S. whose parents were, at the time, resident aliens.
Okay.
And importantly, the article points out that the modern court hasn't signaled any desire to revisit that holding.
Right.
Which makes this whole challenge even more noteworthy.
Makes it stand out for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so if the 14th Amendment says born in the United States, that seems pretty clear-cut, right?
So where did the Trump administration and, some conservative legal minds find any wiggle room to argue against what's basically been the accepted view for so long?
Well, this is where things get a little tricky in the legal weeds.
Yeah.
The whole counter-argument rests on that phrase, subject to the jurisdiction thereof.
Okay.
And the 14th Amendment. So the theory they're putting forward is that if you're a child born in the U.S., but your parents are not here legally,
okay,
then you're not truly, fully subject to the jurisdiction of the United States.
Interesting.
The idea is that these children, in a sense, are still under the jurisdiction of their parents' home country.
So it's like they're trying to make a distinction based on the parent's legal status rather than the child's place of birth.
Exactly.
Well, that's a fine point they're trying to make. How has the broader legal system responded to this argument so far?
Well, it's been pretty clear from the article that lower courts have pretty much flat out rejected this interpretation. In fact, back in January, a federal judge called the executive order blatantly unconstitutional.
Wow.
That's some pretty strong language coming from a judge.
Yeah, definitely.
And then there was a judge in Maryland who said that the administration's plan runs counter to our nation's 250-year history of citizenship by birth.
Yeah.
So clearly there's a big difference of opinion here.
Yeah, those are some strong rebukes. It doesn't sound like the lower courts are buying into this new spin on subject to the jurisdiction.
Nope.
So with that kind of reaction from the lower courts, what about the appeals courts? How have they handled the administration's attempts to push this policy through?
The article says that appeals courts have basically brushed aside the administration's efforts to pause those lower court rulings and the nationwide injunctions that came out of them. These injunctions, which were issued in Maryland, Massachusetts, and Washington, they were requested by a whole mix of states, immigrant rights groups, and individuals. And they've effectively put a stop to the policy nationwide.
So these injunctions are a big roadblock for the administration.
Yeah.
What about groups like the ACLU? What's their take on all of this?
Unsurprisingly, the ACLU is very much against what the administration is trying to do.
Yeah.
The article quotes Cody Woofsy from the ACLU, and they call the executive order outrageously illegal and cruel.
Wow.
And they made it clear they're ready to fight this thing tooth and nail to make sure that no child is denied citizenship because of it.
Okay, so with all this pushback in the lower courts, the administration is now taking it to the highest court in the land.
Right.
But the article points out that what they're asking the Supreme Court right now isn't directly about whether ending birthright citizenship is actually constitutional or not.
Yeah, that's an important distinction to make.
So instead of asking for a straight-up ruling on whether their policy is legal, they're going for what they call a modest request.
Yeah, they want the court to, scale back those nationwide injunctions.
Okay, so they're not looking to completely overturn them, but to find some exceptions.
Exactly.
Maybe create some openings where their policy could actually take effect, even while the legal battle over the bigger constitutional issue is still going on.
That's the idea.
For certain people, at least. That's a pretty strategic move, really.
It is.
What's the Justice Department's rationale behind wanting these nationwide injunctions limited?
Well, their argument is that these universal injunctions are getting out of hand. And that they're stopping a day one executive order from taking effect anywhere in the country. They're talking about hundreds of thousands of people.
Wow.
People who are not before the court nor identified by the court.
So essentially their point is that these injunctions are too sweeping, that the lower courts have overstepped their boundaries a bit, and that the executive branch should be able to put its policies in place while legal challenges are still being sorted out.
Exactly.
It's about power, in a way, isn't it?
You can see it that way.
The balance between different branches of government. Now, there's also this backstop request mentioned in the article as part of their appeal to the Supreme Court.
Right. So as a fallback, the administration is saying, hey, even if you keep those nationwide injunctions in place, at least let us put out some guidelines on how we plan to implement this policy. It's like laying the groundwork. So that if they do win the bigger fight over whether this is constitutional, they can hit the ground running.
So even though they're mainly focused on getting those injunctions narrowed, the Justice Department did use these appeals as a chance to spell out why they think the traditional view of birthright citizenship is wrong.
We did.
So let's get into that. What's the reasoning behind claiming that this long-standing interpretation of the 14th Amendment is flawed?
All right, so they argue that during the 20th century, the executive branch adopted the incorrect position that the Citizenship Clause extended birthright citizenship to almost everyone born in the United States, even children of illegal aliens or temporarily present aliens.
Interesting. And what's the main justification for saying that the executive branch's historical understanding was incorrect?
Their reasoning, straight from the appeals, is that that policy of near universal birthright citizenship has created strong incentives for illegal immigration.
So they're tying their interpretation of the Constitution to their policy goals on immigration.
Yeah, it's not just about legal theory. It's about the perceived consequences of a past policy.
That's a very deliberate way of framing it. Okay, so what happens next? What are the likely steps in this process now that the Supreme Court has these appeals from the Trump administration?
Well, the CNN article suggests that the Supreme Court will probably set a briefing schedule pretty soon. Meaning that those who've challenged the administration's policy, they'll need to respond quickly, possibly within a very short time frame.
Got it. So the Supreme Court is moving fast on this.
In some way.
That shows how seriously they're taking it.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, let's do a quick recap to make sure we're all on the same page here. So the Trump administration is challenging birthright citizenship, right? They're basing their argument on a specific way of reading that phrase in the 14th Amendment, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Lower courts have mostly said, nope, we don't agree with you. And that's led to nationwide injunctions blocking the policy from actually being implemented. So now the administration is asking the Supreme Court to at least scale back these injunctions, saying they're too broad.
Exactly.
And they're also using this opportunity to double down on their belief that the traditional view of birthright citizenship is wrong and has actually encouraged illegal immigration.
That's the gist of it.
It's a lot to unpack, for sure.
Yeah, and I think for you, the listener, the takeaway here is how big this legal challenge really is. We're talking about a debate that gets to the core of who we consider an American citizen, with implications that could be huge, not just for individuals and families, but for the entire future of immigration in the United States.
No doubt about it. And it makes you really think, right, what does it truly mean to be subject to the jurisdiction of a nation? It's a question that reaches far beyond the specific legal arguments being made before the Supreme Court.
Absolutely. It makes you think about what it means to belong to a country, to be part of its fabric.
Yeah. All right, well, that's our deep dive for today, folks. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep into the issues that matter, and we'll see you soon.
See you next time.